Lyra stood at the edge of the clearing, her datapad slipping from her fingers to dangle by its strap. Her mouth hung open, eyes wide with disbelief as she took in the impossible sight before her, where there had once been barren, scorched earth, the aftermath of the colony's emergency landing 3 months prior. Now stretched row upon row of vibrant green. Vegetables climbed trellises made from salvaged ship parts. Fruit-bearing vines wound around makeshift poles. Herbs carpeted the ground in fragrant patches. The garden sprawled across nearly 2 acres, meticulously organized and thriving under the orange sun of Kethera Prime. And tending to it, with dirt-covered claws and what could only be described as pride in their luminescent eyes, were the Cathani cubs. Fex noticed her first. The young Cathani, barely into his second molt, straightened from where he'd been inspecting a tomato plant. His scaled snout wrinkled in what Lyra had learned to recognize as a smile, revealing rows of serrated teeth that would make any Earth predator envious. "Human Lyra," Fex called out, his translator rendering his chittering speech into enthusiastic standard. "You have returned from the supply run. Come see what we have accomplished." Lyra's legs carried her forward on autopilot, her mind still struggling to process what she was seeing. The Cathani were apex predators, obligate carnivores with hunting instincts so refined that their species had dominated their homeworld's food chain for millennia. Their cubs were taught to track, to stalk, to kill from the moment they could walk. Agriculture was not merely foreign to them. It was antithetical to everything their biology and culture represented. Yet here they were, 30 Cathani younglings, covered in soil and tending plants with the careful attention of master gardeners. "How?" The word escaped Lyra's lips before she could stop it. "How did you? Why did you?" Fex's tail swished with pleasure, a gesture he'd picked up from observing Lyra's cat back on the ship. "You said humans need plants to feel at home. You said gardens feed the soul as well as the body. We observed how sad you became when the emergency destroyed the hydroponics bay." Another cub, smaller than Fex with iridescent purple scales, scampered over carrying a basket of what looked like bell peppers. "We researched," she announced proudly. "Human agricultural techniques, companion planting, soil pH levels, crop rotation." Lyra's vision blurred with unexpected tears. 3 months ago, when the wandering star had crashed on Kethera Prime, she'd been certain they were doomed. The Cathani were known throughout the galaxy as fierce, unyielding warriors. Their planet was off-limits to most species, and unauthorized landings were traditionally met with swift and lethal force. But when the adult Cathani had arrived at the crash site, they hadn't attacked. They'd offered sanctuary, medical aid, and resources while the human crew worked to repair their vessel. The only condition was that the human passengers help educate their cubs in exchange, a cultural exchange program, they'd called it. Lyra had been assigned to teach basic xenobiology and ecology. She'd shared stories of Earth, of forests and farms, of humanity's ancient connection to the soil. She'd mentioned, perhaps wistfully, how she missed her mother's garden back home, how the smell of fresh basil could transport her across light years, how working with living plants gave humans a sense of peace in the cold void of space. She'd never imagined the cubs were listening so intently. "The adults said we were wasting time," Fex explained, leading Lyra down a path between raised beds. "They said predators do not dig in dirt like prey species. But we told them that humans are also predators. Omnivores, yes, but with forward-facing eyes and persistence hunting in their history. And humans grow gardens. So perhaps there is no shame in it." The eldest was very angry, the purple-scaled cub added, her translator crackling with what sounded like amusement. "She said we were dishonoring our ancestors." Then Fex told her that adapting to new circumstances is the ultimate predator skill, and that humans conquered their world by learning to shape it, not just hunt in it. Lyra laughed, a sound caught between a sob and genuine mirth. "What did she say to that?" Fex's eyes gleamed. "She said if we were so convinced, we should prove it. So we did. We studied your agricultural databases. We analyzed Kethera Prime's soil composition. We traded our combat training time for garden work, much to our instructor's dismay. And we applied the same focus we use for hunting to make things grow instead of killing them." They stopped at the garden's center, where a massive oak sapling stood, barely 3 feet tall, but already showing signs of vigorous growth. Around its base, Someone had carefully arranged stones painted with both human and Chthoni symbols. "We grew this from an acorn you mentioned in class," Fex said softly. "You said oak trees live for hundreds of years on Earth, that they represent strength and endurance. We thought." He paused, his translator struggling with the emotional nuance. "We thought perhaps one day, when you return to the stars, you could remember that even predator cubs can nurture life. That we learned from you to create, not just destroy." Lyra dropped to her knees, no longer fighting the tears streaming down her face. She reached out and gently touched the sapling's trunk, then looked up at the gathered cubs, these young hunters who had set aside their cultural programming to create something beautiful, simply because a lonely human had shared her homesickness. "This is the most incredible thing anyone has ever done for me," she whispered. Fex settled beside her, his massive frame surprisingly careful as he avoided crushing any plants. "Humans do something unusual in the galaxy," he said thoughtfully. "They make others want to be better, not through conquest or intimidation, but through stories and kindness and showing that there are many ways to be strong. You taught us that." Other cubs gathered around, some clutching gardening tools fashioned from whatever materials they could scavenge, others holding baskets of produce. They had dirt under their claws and leaves in their scales, and they looked absolutely delighted with themselves. Besides, the purple-scaled cub added with a mischievous trill, "We discovered something important. Watching things grow is just as satisfying as hunting. It simply requires more patience. And Chthoni have excellent patience when we're stalking prey." "We're stalking tomatoes now," another cub announced solemnly, causing a ripple of chittering laughter through the group. Lyra laughed too, wiping her eyes as she stood and surveyed the impossible garden once more. Somewhere in the distance, she could hear the wandering star's engines humming. Repairs were nearly complete. Soon, the human crew would return to space, continuing their journey through the cosmos. But here, on Kethera Prime, in soil enriched by volcanic minerals and tended by claws meant for tearing, life flourished. 30 predator cubs had learned to nurture instead of hunt, to plant instead of kill, and in doing so had given one human the most precious gift imaginable. Proof that compassion and determination could bridge any divide. As Fex handed her a perfectly ripe tomato, still warm from the sun, Lyra understood something fundamental about humanity's place in the galaxy. They were not the strongest species, nor the smartest, nor the most advanced, but they had an inexplicable gift for inspiring others to reach beyond what they thought possible. And sometimes, that was enough to make gardens grow in the most unlikely places.